And understand this, if American workers are being denied their right to organize and collectively bargain when I'm in the White House, I'll put on a comfortable pair of shoes myself. I'll walk on that picket line with you as President of the United States of America. Because workers deserve to know that somebody's standing in their corner.
Said about joining picket lines back in 2007 when he said, if American workers are being denied their right to organize when I'm in the White House, I will put on a comfortable pair of shoes and I will walk on that picket line with you as President of the United States. Is he ready to put on a comfortable pair of shoes and fulfill that promise?
I think, Chip, that the president, as president, has obviously an ability to be heard when he speaks, and he spoke to the situation in Wisconsin and his views on it last week, and I'll leave it at that.
At the time, but do you think he meant that when he said it?
I wasn't with him at the time, but again, I think that the president has different means of speaking out on issues and being heard, and clearly he did. He made his viewpoints known on the situation in Wisconsin, the need for people to come together. He takes very seriously the fiscal situation that the states find themselves in, some of the states, and understands it because he understands it at the federal level. But he encourages the parties involved to come together and sacrifice together and reach a solution that serves the interests of all the people of the states, just like he's trying to do for the broader nation.
Hey, welcome everybody to this week's episode of Left Reckoning, episode 11, man. We've been moving. My name is David Griscom, broadcasting to all of y'all live from Austin, Texas. Joined today by my good friend, Matt. How's it going, brother?
It is going well, David. Good to be speaking with you this evening.
Yeah, well, we got a pretty exciting show coming up in a little bit. We're going to be premiering our interview with Victor Pougy, who is a Brazilian journalist who was at The Intercept Brazil while they were releasing all of these really critical leaks and in-depth analysis of what was going on with Lava Jato. Really excited for that interview. It's a real treat, honestly, to be able to talk to somebody who not only has such great insight and knowledge, but also was a very important player. Was on the board when all of this was going on. So it's going to be a really exciting interview. And then later on, we're going to be talking about these new the NFTs and Matt's favorite subject, cryptocurrency.
Non-fungible tokens, David. For those who don't know, it's the new thing in artwork. The aura, which I'm messing up my theorists. Was it Walter Benjamin said the aura is removed? In the era of mass reproduction.
Yeah.
I saw a take that NFTs.
Oh man, wait! So there are going to be some really obnoxious art theory criticisms of NFTs, and you won't know which side to be on that one.
There was a take that that NFTs bring the aura back. They're bringing the aura back, baby. So
it's a stimulus project for out of work PhDs. Well, we're really looking forward to that. This is gonna be a jam-packed show, and then of course going to be breaking down a lot of exciting stuff in the post game as well. So you won't want to miss that. But Matt, why don't you set us up here, because we wanted to talk a little bit about the shifts that we're seeing in politics from the the Democratic Party and in politics in general. But you sort of set us up well with that intro video with that ghoul, Jay Carney, or for folks who don't remember, that was Obama's press secretary, who then went on to have a very profitable career working for Amazon, most recently spending time maligning and attacking workers in Amazon facilities who were trying to make sure that they had the basic protections from COVID-19. So a great tradition in the Obama administration there.
Yeah, I mean, it's the ultimate low bar, really, right? In order for Joe Biden to be an acceptable president in terms of labor, he needs to be way better than Obama was. And to that, and so and we're in a different era, right? Like we're going to talk about this a lot. We're in an era that's much less austere. We're not talking about Reinhardt and Rogoff and stuff like that anymore, right? The Republicans spent in the CARES Act. I mean, a lot of it went to corporations, but right, they also put a dent in childhood poverty, for instance, right? And we talked about this with Matt Karp last week, the difference between material politics and class politics, which is at this point in terms of class politics, absolutely incomplete for Joe Biden, right? What could be sort of structural in the most recent stimulus is the childhood allowance. Why that's incomplete is because it remains to be seen if Democrats are going to force that to be a permanent part of our welfare state. So we'll see. And then there's these things we're going to talk about. We're going to emphasize the PRO Act, and also the thing that was removed, which so you get an incomplete minus, was the $15 minimum wage. And why was that the one thing removed? Just because it was structural, right? That's the massively structural change. And so will Democrats do this? Structural became like a code, a buzzword among elite Democrats. Like we're going to do big structural change. Well, let's define what those are. And in terms of labor, it's a $15 and it's the PRO Act. And in terms of democracy, it's HR 1. And so there's this good article here I want to share. Just came out today by Brandon Magner, Jacobin, and it brings it down to the filibuster. You need to get rid of the filibuster if you're going to do anything on this. Now, I appreciate Brandon the tone of this can actually happen, right? Like there's actually been more rumblings that maybe you wouldn't expect that. There will be support to returning to the talking filibuster, which means that a senator will have to stay up there and, actually occupy the podium or whatever. And I think I don't think Lindsey Graham, I think it will have a fundamentally big effect on the Senate business. I think it's definitely something that I would get rid of the filibuster entirely. This really is just returning the filibuster to what people's conception of the filibuster should be, but they should definitely do it. And I am encouraged that they're tying it to the PRO Act and HR 1, and that they're willing to take on those fights. And I think they should be encouraged in that. But I think the other thing is I like news cycles and giving plaudits for doing the right things, because the truth is, like Bessemer, my understanding is Biden's words have actually had a really solid effect there. And so maybe it was just good that he didn't promise to actually go there himself. And so like it's there. And these are just the things, like how structural is it, right? Like, and that is still what remains to be seen entirely. And so I think like all these questions of is it a return to anything, or what era of economics are we in? It kind of remains to be seen.
Yeah. And it's been interesting over these past couple of weeks. Like, so this show is still fairly young, and we very much have been, as a project, have been sort of interacting with this early period of the Biden administration, what that means for left-wing politics. One of the big stories that we were focused on early on was how timid Biden and a lot of the Democrats were on the stimulus, particularly on the amount of money that they were going to be providing to people. And I think it is something that is still important to note, that they had all the potential in the world to increase those payments to folks, and to make sure that people understand that those are tactical and political decisions from the Biden administration, which actively just take money out of working people's pockets, right? But let's put that aside for a second, because the way that Marxists and socialists and materialists view politics in this current historical moment is going to be very different from like a kind of liberal pundit, not just because of like orientation, but because of the way that you're viewing the field that politics, the theater that politics is, happening on, right? And what do I mean by that? It's like, you've seen since this stimulus has gone into effect, there's been a lot of gushing in liberal media over the stimulus, mainly doing that thing that they always do, which say like, oh, wow, he's FDR now, right? Look, it's certainly not that. It really, really is not that kind of structural change that we saw in FDR. And again, FDR ain't some kind of radical socialist or anything like that. That was just kind of like basic social democracy kind of programs in the United States, right? But they're already, sort of playing up this, this story around the stimulus. And I think, as Matt Carpenter and a lot of other people have noted, it seems like there's actually been a shift across the board. The Republicans also put forward a massive stimulus as well, right? And still very early in the Biden administration, but more when it comes down to dollars and cents than what happened in this most recent stimulus package as well, right? So this whole like nonsense that you're seeing from folks are saying like, oh, Biden is going to be the most progressive president ever. And then they love to throw in this kind of thing like I'm talking about liberal pundits, by the way. Like Biden's going to be the most progressive president ever. And it's going to be by accident. And it's only because all of these like left movements of the Bernie campaign pushed him left. And it's like, I'm sorry. We're seeing very clearly that that's not going to be the case either. Right. And when it comes to anyone being a progressive, looking at how much Biden is willing to, one, continue the militarization of the United States border and continuing to ratchet up pressure against China and Bolivia and all of these other governments around the world, that should just disqualify him from being considered a progressive, squishy of a word as that is, by anybody. Right. But it has to be noted like that. We're in this moment right now where they did put this stimulus in that does, as Matt was saying, does some things that are going to help stop the bleeding, right? Providing people with, money, these credits for families, that is a positive program, right? Childhood poverty is a massive cause of poverty in the United States, right? That's something that's worth addressing. But, and as Matt was noting earlier, the fact that it's not permanent, should reveal to people that what happened here was not Biden and the Democrats waking up one day and saying, oh, you know what, it's finally time for us to stand up for the working class of America. They did it because we are living through a pandemic whose economic effects are still hitting everyday people in extreme ways.
Yeah, important to note that Mitt Romney also had a very generous childhood poverty policy.
And if you don't mind pulling up Matt Karp's piece real quick, there's a section that I want to read from. But everyone should go through Matt Karp's piece, that he teased last week on the show. No, Joe Biden won't give us social democracy. And it's a really good piece because it's not just him saying like, oh, well, look, a socialist plan would be so much more radical or anything like that. Of course, that's the case. But Matt actually makes a much stronger structural critique of what we're seeing with this stimulus and how like the left should be thinking about it. So I'll just read this section from it. For all the huzzas about progress toward American social democracy, it is hard to see how anything here even begins to alter the social relations between worker and boss, citizen and state, labor and capital. There is a reason why 170 business leaders, including CEOs of Goldman Sachs, Google, Lyft, Siemens, Visa, and Zillow, and Vox Media too, released a letter supporting the package. The one provision in the House bill that did challenge the preferences of some business leaders, the $15 an hour minimum wage, was dispatched in the Senate without any countervailing pressure from top Democrats, right? This is a critical point. This stimulus bill will help people, right? You have to do it, actually. And that's why you're seeing the wealthy and even some, like the Republicans, look, they're not supporting it, they're not voting for it, but they sure as hell are going to their constituents and acting like they influenced it, especially the more popular aspects of it, right? There is a shift that's happening, and it's a shift that is happening because of massive crisis and realignment in global capital that started in the 2008 financial crisis, right? This is an important point. And there's another really great essay that I think people should check out in Damage Magazine called Is the Left to Thank for the Stimulus by Dominic King, which is just worth checking out because, he's sort of pushing back on this notion that this happened because, the left is, pushing Biden left, right? What we're seeing is not some kind of like ideological victory for the left. What we're seeing right now is there's a stimulus that has some good provisions in it, right? Not perfect. and we'll get into some of those in a second, is going out not because some kind of ideological debate has been won, but because this stimulus is needed to keep this thing going. And I'm talking about capitalism, and I'm talking about the exploitation of wage laborers across the country. We live in a society that's very much dependent on consumers. And when you look at the unequal distribution of income, has already existed pre-pandemic, but only got worse, right, over this past year. You have to give some money to people to make sure that this system has some oil, right, that it can keep chugging along. Right. We noted again that, some of the better things in this are time limited. And then when it came to actual more structural aspects of the bill, like $15 an hour minimum wage, right, those were thrown out. Think about, and so I'm making this point because we need to sort of, take a second as the left and as socialists, as we are trying to reorient ourselves in a political landscape that is different, especially from the last 4 years under Trump, but is also going to be different because we don't have the same kind of reliance on the Bernie presidential campaign to focus our interests. Like, we have to start thinking about what we're going to do. And that also means that we need to start reinterpreting the world around us, right? Doing that kind of structural analysis, because people have learned a playbook of kind of criticism of the Democratic Party that will definitely be true in the top sense, like the Democratic Party doesn't stand up for workers, right? But the tactics that the Democratic Party uses are going to change, right? So think about something like Medicare for all, and why that's different from a kind of stimulus program. Medicare for all is a non-reformist reform because it takes a huge sector of our society out of the claws of private hands, right? And brings that into the public domain. That's a structural shift, right? So again, it's great. It's preferable for our system when it comes to healthcare to provide subsidies for, poor people versus nothing. But that doesn't alter the dynamic of, a private health insurance industry that is just, sucking up income from folks and also limiting people's access to healthcare, not to mention the structural power that bosses then have to be able to use access to healthcare as a tool in the negotiation room, right? So moving that system away from that kind of that private system, right, where it is run for the interests of like the bourgeoisie, the wealthy, the capitals, your boss, right? And moving that into a public domain, that is a victory. And that's like something that we need to like really be understanding, especially when it comes to things like even cash payments, right? We want to be trying to claw back as socialists as much of this of the things that are needed to survive and how the things that are needed to just live an enjoyable life, God forbid, pleasurable or one with a little bit of leisure, right? We want to be pulling as much of that away from the hands of private interests as possible. Right. And and we've seen this with like some of the critiques from the socialist left of the stimulus, because they're sort of still thinking about politics in this kind of like spectrum way, where it's like, oh, if they increase the amount of money that was spent, that would somehow make it more socialist, right? That's not necessarily the case, right? Remember, socialists are not just more liberals, right? We want to help people as much as possible immediately. So that means we're going to support, things that just put people's money in people's pockets when they need money, right? But we want structural change, right? Providing rental assistance is different than public housing. One-off payments are different from wage increases across the board. Targeted tax credits are different than a federal commitment to aggressively support and protect labor laws and the right to organize, utilizing the full arsenal of the state to help people in that struggle, right? Socialists are not just really liberals. We have a structural critique to how capitalism works and how it exploits us, and how we want to beat that is by pulling as much of the system of our needs away from the tyranny of the few and the powerful into the hands of the many, right? I talked about this on Tuesday. I think we're going to continue to try to work through this, but I just am watching this shift happening, and it's not a kind of shift that we're seeing from them where they're like now are suddenly standing up for the working class. We're just entering a different period of history in of this system in the United States. Just like the Democratic Party and the Republican Party had different initiatives and goals in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, we're going to see those things develop in the 2020s and the 2030s, right? But the fundamental relationship, right, where these parties act in the interests of the ruling class and not in the interests of the working class, that has remained unchanged. We need to make sure that we're paying attention to the tactics, right, and being able to critique those while also understanding that kind of general dynamic. I just get worried because I don't want us to get outflanked again, right? Because we've seen this happen time and time again, where the logic changes, the way that they do politics changes, and the left is stuck in confusion for a decade. Our anti-austerity arguments are a great example of that. Like, we're really ready to have a conversation we should have been having in 2008, right? About like austerity and government programs and stimulus.
That's what
right now,
I mean.
you know what I'm saying?
Not to make the MMT people mad, but that's kind of what the MMT conversation feels like, right? Like an older conversation.
No, exactly. And it's just like we can't. Our theoretical advances are always going to have a bit of lag time to like the present moment. I'm just saying, like, let's not just sit back and saying like, oh, we already understand everything. It's like, no, there are developments that are changing. That doesn't mean that the class dynamics are changing, or that Biden's left wing or the stimulus program is some kind of key pathway to social democracy. We're critiquing it right here. But we're just saying, like, don't use old maps and old models. Like, understand that, this is a dynamic system, and Marxism and socialism and dialectical materialism are also dynamic systems that can respond to changes, right? And let's just understand there's shifts that are going on.
Right. And like the thing in the post game, I'll play old, when I used to do remixes of LBJ and Nixon tapes, Informationer, of LBJ talking to George Smathers, a Florida senator, and it goes to show, like, a lot of Democrats didn't oppose Goldwater because of the racism. It was because he was a threat to business. So Smathers is talking about how a major grocery magnate in the South is like, we can't do Goldwater's economic policies because people literally won't have money to spend in my fucking grocery stores, right? And so yes, like this, it's better than austerity, and good riddance to that era. But yeah, it's definitely something new, and I think, I mean, you'll have to educate us on like what all this era of the Fed bankrolling the stock market and corporate America, what that actually means, because it's scary.
No, and I don't want to say that like austerity has been defeated and say like we're now in like a completely new era. I'm just saying it's like, okay, obviously Republicans don't have the same ability to oppose any kind of increase in spending like they did in 2008, right? There has been a political shift, and we need to understand that that's existing. That doesn't mean that we're in a better situation. I think that's like the biggest thing that I want to make sure that people aren't mistaken what I'm saying. It's like, I'm not saying we're in a better situation at all. Sorry to be bring bad news or anything like that. I'm just saying that things are changing. We just have to always be keeping up with that. But to have more of these kind of conversations, definitely support us on patreon.com/Left Reckoning to get access to the post game where we take all of y'all's questions. Usually have a pretty good time there. We're going to be also expanding a lot of the patron content as well in the next month or so. I was sort of teasing this. I think we're working on something to come out the next month on James Connolly, one of the great Irish Marxists. But I think we're going to try to make that into like a general series where we're going to talk to folks who have been really influenced by particular thinkers about what that thinker has meant for their political work, their theoretical work, and also maybe personal stories, bios, things like that. So really looking forward to that as well. And this Sunday too, don't forget, we're going to be premiering a conversation I had with Seneca Savoy to talk about the fight here in Austin against a pretty nasty movement to undo a lot of important work that has been done here to help houseless folks. So don't miss that either.
Yeah, that's great. Seneca was briefly on Majority Report, but I'm looking forward to checking that out. All right, shall we get to Victor?
I think so. So we have this conversation with Victor. Really, I'm really looking forward to that. It's gonna be a fun conversation. Matt and I will come on the other side to talk about NFTs. I want, which I'm honestly looking forward to, because they're the more and more I've learned about them, the more ridiculous they seem. I just wanted to make sure that folks aren't misunderstanding Victor at the top here, because he is going to be talking about Lava Jato and sort of giving a more in-depth history of what happened. And at the beginning, he's sort of giving the kind of general like liberal left understanding of Lava Jato. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand him and thinking that he was like a supporter of this at all. He was just saying like, okay, this is what the general public and like liberals were thinking about this in Brazil and also globally. But we'll get into some really interesting conversations about Lula and how he's already sort of making Bolsonaro run scared.
Yeah, and actually the material politics in Brazil a little bit too. So yeah, take a quick break and then we'll be back with that interview.
All right, everybody, welcome back to Left Reckoning. On March 8th, we got some very good news. Lula da Silva, who has for years been targeted by this very political trial, Lava Jato, had his political rights restored as Supreme Court judge. Fachin rescinded and dismissed the investigation against Lula da Silva. We're going to talk a little bit about what Lava Jato was, what those implications means for Brazil, and also why there seems to be some other motivations from the Brazilian judiciary for making this recent ruling. But I won't prolong this any longer. We're very lucky to be joined by a Brazilian journalist who was also at Brazil The Intercept during the Lava Jato case, Victor Pougy, to help us break this down today. How are you doing today, Victor?
Hey, Matt. Hey, David. It's a pleasure to be here. Happy to be with you guys and to talk about finally some piece of good news.
Yeah, I mean, and I know most people who have been listening to this show and also to TMBS over the years have a pretty good understanding of what Lava Jato was. But if somebody were to just be coming across this interview or video and you were to just give them the top line sort of rundown of over what has happened over the past couple of years, that would be really helpful.
All right. So as with everything about Brazil, we're going to have to simplify a lot because when anyone asks anything about Brazil, the temptation is always to like, well, it all started 500 years ago, but we're trying not to do that here and not go that far back. So we're going to think like in around 2013, which is when this task force called Lava Jato started. It started off a small city in the south of Brazil, which it's not very well known outside of Brazil, called Curitiba. It's a capital of a small state in the south of the country. And there was based an anti-corruption task force whose main role was to investigate financial crimes related to Petrobras, the Brazilian public oil company. What is remarkable about this, it was remarkable from the start, which is that Petrobras, the company, is in Rio de Janeiro. Brasilia, where all the politicians are is obviously in Brasilia. But in spite of that, this small city in Curitiba ended up centralizing all these investigations for this because they had the role of looking through suspicious financial transactions that were related to Petrobras. Within that whole crazy thing, when they started pulling threads, it started to kind of like blow up the whole political system. And what began as this anti-corruption task force, this transparency, oriented group that was investigated, ended up somewhere in between, becoming somewhat of a political hit job. So there's been people from the day one who saw, look, these guys are bad, they shouldn't be doing this. And there's people who on the first day were enthusiastic about this and were slowly souring onto this task force as it became a little bit more clear that there was some political goals in there. So at some point between 2013 and 2018, somewhat, the leaders of this task force got into their heads that the way their goal should be not to investigate and pull these threads or whatever their initial work was, but they started to have this kind of operate in the logic that the way to combat corruption in Brazil was to remove the Workers' Party, PT, in the Brazilian acronym, which is Lula's party, the party that Lula built throughout his whole life, and obviously many other people. And it's one of the most vibrant parties here in the country, probably the largest left-wing party in the Western Hemisphere. Although I don't want to nitpick into that. There's like people who are crazy about statistics that are going to be mad at me. But, it's a very vibrant party, one of the most important left-wing parties in Latin America. And as these investigators, these prosecutors got into their heads that the way to combat corruption was to combat the Workers' Party, and they got obsessed with getting Lula. So at some point, it is clear for most neutral observers that they got contaminated by some very, very deep-seated political bias. In 2018, which was the last presidential election here in Brazil, Lula was barred from running because he had been convicted by the Lava Jato task force on some financial crimes supposedly related to Petrobras. He's said to have benefited from an apartment, and that apartment was supposedly renovated by some construction company as a kickback, and there's also like something about his farm where he used to go. So they were linking these benefits to Lula, and they were also linking all that stuff to Petrobras, which is what justified them investigating it in the first place. Because, as I said, Lula lives in Sao Paulo, Petrobras is in Rio, most of the political stuff happens in Brasilia. So the way that these guys in Curitiba had to justify investigating this stuff was by saying this all falls within the jurisdiction of these Petrobras investigating task force. So we fast forward a little bit. Actually, we go backward and forth, just going to paper over some stuff in there, which is that we got at the Intercept a leak, a huge trove of documents that are chats that were hacked from the people within the task force. So it's chats that you can see the messages between the prosecutors and the judge. So from reading these messages, it's very clear that there was some very, very improper dealings going on. As I said, the prosecutors were coordinating with the judge, who was going to then judge the case.
I mean, it's important to really highlight that too, that these links are extreme scandals in themselves. Like what was revealed in them, like what was actually being said was a scandal, but the fact that there was even this kind of direct line of communication where you have the judges basically giving them tips is a ridiculous scandal and sort of exposes a lot of the motivations of this trial from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, if this had happened in traffic court, it would already be improper, right? You can't like be the prosecutor coordinating with the guy that's going to hand the sentence, because this happened to involve the like most important political issues of the country. It's like obviously a million times more important. But at the end of the day, this task force was a bunch of prosecutors, and there was a judge who was judging all the cases related to this. This judge is Sérgio Moro. And this guy, everyone could tell if they were interested in seeing that he had some like very deep hatred for PT and for Lula in particular, as did the prosecutors. And you see throughout the whole thing, the prosecutors and the judge communicating, and the judge being like, hey, don't use this is weak proof, don't go for that one. Oh, did you see this? Use this, use that. So obviously scandalous stuff. But anyways, we're in 2018. Lula is unable to run for president because he has been convicted, and there is a clean slate law in Brazilian politics, a law that was actually signed by the Workers' Party during an effort to like fight corruption. So a bunch of laws that are designed to fight corruption were approved within the Workers' Party. So this is something that is often thought to be ironic, which is that the Workers' Party put all these mechanisms in place that allowed corruption to be investigated. They investigated, but the investigators decided to use it against the party, not just to like investigate it in general. And now that we see that after the Workers' Party has gone from power, all these mechanisms has basically been scrapped. So if you're an anti-corruption prosecutor now in Brazil, your life's much harder because of the work you did and ended up influencing the election. So 2018, Lula is unable to run because he has been convicted. He was leading all the polls by far. He was extremely popular. He was a favorite to win. But he was unable, he was in jail, and he didn't have his political rights restored. So we had his VP on the ticket, Fernando Haddad, became the presidential candidate. He runs and loses to Bolsonaro, a story that we all know.
And it just needs to be stated again too, like this happens in the middle of the presidential campaign, right? Like this isn't like, just sort of like early on, and like, Haddad has like all this time to really like, run his campaign, separately from Lula. I mean, this is very much Lula gets invalidated as a political candidate in the height of like the political season. It's extremely scandalous, and very much the dates line up very well with like the political calendar, right? It was not exactly neutral event.
Yeah, it is, remarkable that such a corruption investigation would be so coincidentally superimposed to the political calendar, right? Mm-hmm. But there's like many examples of very, very clearly problematic things that this task force and this judge in particular did, targeting Lula and the Workers' Party. So I want to give you one example, which is a very illustrative one, which is in 2016, Dilma Rousseff. She was the handpicked successor of Lula. She was the president also for the Workers' Party. A remarkable person. She was a Marxist guerrilla during the military dictatorship. She was captured, she was tortured. She came back and won an election to be president. And became like commander-in-chief of the armed forces that tortured her. Anyways, in 2016, there's like political crisis, and the opposition, who never quite accepted having lost in 2014. 2014 was at the height of Lava Jato, so it was when PT was more severely wounded at any other time. But Dilma wins just by like the skin of her teeth over a center-right challenger. But immediately the strategy of the opposition became to boycott her government. Mm-hmm. And then in 2016, there's an impeachment process open against Dilma by this opposition for like these like arcane budgetary rules, right? So it's basically finding a reason, right? It's like these budgetary maneuvers that are technically illegal, but everyone does, and people have been doing after Dilma was impeached, and no one else got impeached. So it's very clearly just an excuse to impeach her.
Yeah, and it's just, again, for like the American audience, it's like she's like impeached. Yeah, for what you're saying is like budgetary like maneuvers, or like, you know, but like even like take it at a certain level, like budgetary mismanagement, maybe, right? You could say,
Yeah.
right. But, you know, in the United States, for example, we have had audits of the Pentagon that said that they can't audit, you know, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars of where Pentagon money is going. Like, you have to understand that, like, the way that this is reported in the United States in particular always gives the kind of talking points that the right wing is making, right? And not this kind of full context. So what you see with Dilma is very much, as you were saying, they found a reason to, you know, create a scandal to take somebody who won an election out of power. And then we see something very similar end up happening later with Lula.
Yeah, because there's like this creation of an atmosphere that there's this feeling antipetismo that we call in Portuguese, which is like anti-PT sentiment, right? And that became inflated, obviously, for, you know, 4 straight presidents were from the Workers' Party, and, you know, they represent not very popular constituency. So there's also there always been sectors that were very hostile to them, presumably, right? This happens everywhere. But then with Lava Jato in 2013, creating the narrative that, you know, the blame of all the corruption in the universe is Lula. And then you have like tropes, you know, circulating on WhatsApp or memes on Facebook saying like, oh, Lula stole like $100 billion trillion, right? I've gotten like images of like, yo, PT stole, and the numbers are like bigger than like the GDP of the planet, right? But like people just spread that.
Jesus Christ.
And then, so it is an atmosphere of like anti-corruption investigation. There's this feeling that like, oh, PT is super corrupt. And then these guys, you know, they find this excuse to start an impeachment process. And it just becomes like a public opinion battle, not a, you know, a judgment on whether this budgetary maneuver is illegal and warrants an impeachment or not. So, you know, she ends up being impeached because of, you know, corruption is bad and PT is evil and things like that. Ironically, all the people that impeach her are like super corrupt and are like neck deep in the Lava Jato stuff. Dilma has never, like, no one has ever found a single like penny. She's like a remarkable woman. And, you know, when she was president, you'd hear like figures in Congress complaining that Dilma was like not up for the game because she wouldn't like be willing to do these negotiations because everyone, you know, insists that she's like annoyingly, impossibly correct, right? And no one can stand that. But anyways, she ends up being impeached in 2016, right? But during the impeachment process, she tries to nominate Lula as the chief of staff in the middle of that, because her bet is that with Lula in the government, Lula is like the Pele, the Michael Jordan of politics, right? And then he's going to be able to pull something off and stop this, which is not an unreasonable thing to suppose. She nominates Lula to be minister, and then she nominates him like in the afternoon. At night, Judge Moro leaks a tapped phone call between her and Lula, in which it is argued by Moro and by Lava Jato that this phone call is Lula and Dilma coordinating about this ministerial position that he's going to assume, because ministers are they have a legal privilege in which they can only be judged by the Supreme Court, whereas Lava Jato, as we know, is not the Supreme Court, is like in the lowest level of the judiciary. So the idea that Lava Jato was putting out there was that Dilma is only doing that to save Lula from being investigated, and then they leaked this phone call. So we have like a judge of like a small town. First off, is not even like a Supreme Court judge or a high court judge. He's leaking phone calls tapped of the president of the country. And then it turns out that these wiretaps were illegal. So they had a warrant to wiretap between like whatever 12:30 and 4, and this phone call ended up happening at 4:30, right? So it wasn't even supposed to exist, and even if it existed, it's not acceptable evidence. But they leak it anyways, because once it's out in the public, and once you can tell people, oh, they are like plotting evil things, it's very hard to go on TV like, yeah, but this was improperly leaked. It just doesn't sit, right? So because of that, Lula is actually like stopped from being minister by a Supreme Court justice who writes a decision saying, no, this is clearly to stop an investigation. He can't be minister. So he wasn't minister. The impeachment happened, but now a few years later with Lava Jato, we know that there were many other phone calls that were tapped between Lula and many people on that date. And these other calls show Lula clearly saying, oh my God, I don't want to be minister. Why are they making me do this? Oh, I'm going to have to go and save this government, right? Jesus. And like, he's like talking to a bunch of different people. He's like, I don't want to be a minister. He's saying how he's going to have like to do the political coordination. Like, it is very clear that it had nothing to do with that legal protection, but that's just what they do. They wanted to create a narrative.
Well, exactly, and that's one point about Lava Jato, that it was so sinister, but it's worth noting is like they really did understand how important crafting the media narrative was, right? Like that's why you release that, right? Is so you can create this level of doubt and get this public support, which was so necessary in the 2018 election to basically be able to invalidate Lula, as a presidential. Like they knew that they had to build that support way before.
Yeah, because it's not like from one day to the other, right? Lula was president and he left office. He was like popularity was like 85%, 90%. And you can just like from one day to the other erode that. It's like a long process that just keeps going. But
what ends up happening is Lula, they put Lula gets invalidated as a candidate. They put Lula in jail. Lula then gets let out on like essentially house arrest, while the trial is unfolding. But in this meantime, Bolsonaro comes into power, puts Moro up as the justice minister, right? So this small judge who ends up having very clearly serious political ambitions ends up rising, to one of the highest positions, in the Brazilian state, and that's the height of Lava Jato's popularity. But over the past few years, we've seen more and more like the popularity has began to dwindle because of some of the great stuff that was exposed through The Intercept. Well, not great stuff, but great reporting at The Intercept that exposed horrible stuff.
The bad stuff that great reporting exposed. So, I mean, it is clear cut, right? There's like Lula and Bolsonaro were like the front runners for the elections. And then Judge Moro does something that keeps Lula from running, and then the lane's open, Bolsonaro wins, and then Bolsonaro goes and nominates the guy who stopped his adversary from running and gives him a ministerial position as a justice minister, right? I mean, it is obviously quid pro quo, and I mean, it's just one of like the many obviously scandalous things that happened. But just circling back for something that you said about how Lava Jato had an understanding that they had to work the media. And that is exactly what it is. It was like more of a media spectacle than a police investigation, right? There were so many examples of things that are just done just for show. If you're reading the chats, and a lot of stories have been written about this, how they're like thinking about how it's going to play on TV, what they're doing, and how they need to alert camera crews to be there when they're like arresting someone. Just one example of that. During these investigations, they did something called a coercive conduction. I don't know if there's any legal term for that in English, but it's something where you're having someone go in for a talk in the course of an investigation. Then they have you come in to give explanations, right? And then you can call a person and be like, hey, do you want to come collaborate with this investigation? And then they're like, sure. And then they go, or they say, no, I don't want to do, screw you. And then if the person doesn't want to go, the judge can then create this coercive, like a way in which they are like, obliged to go. They did that with Lula before Lula ever even refused going, right? Instead of saying, hey, Lula, do you want to come in and you know, answer some questions? And Lula says he would have been more than happy to do that, but they don't do that. They just do the thing where they go like with a bunch of police cars at 6 a.m. in the morning with all the camera crews, and then they take him and then put him in an airplane. You know, it's all for show. And Moro, way before Moro was anything, for his during his academic times, he writes an article about an Italian operation. There's also a very famous Operation Clean Hands, which was where about the mafia and things like that, very similar to Lava Jato in some ways. And the conclusion of his article, and you can read his article in like the Law Review Journal of whatever, it's basically said like, no, the most important thing is that to have the media in your side. And then in you know, a situation in which like all media outlets don't have any money, they're firing all the reporters, like they don't have people to pour over Petrobras statements and find whatever. So like if the prosecutor calls you and was like, oh, I have this document that proves corruption, you're like, sure, I'll run it, right? How could I have investigated this? And so they just keep like spoon feeding all these leaks and scoops to the media. And then they have like these huge like alliance with most of the media here in Brazil, which was just continual and just like critically reporting whatever Lava Jato says. And the fever only breaks with when we published the leaks that some people in the media was like, oh crap, like we were in the wrong here, right? But I forget what I was going.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's very true, and you know, obviously not being in Brazil, but watching this story unfold from the United States, it was very clear to us what was going on, and it was very frustrating to see outlets like the New York Times and the Guardian, basically, as you're saying, just like accepting whatever was spoon fed to them. And yeah, I do think once those leaks came out, there was a little bit of a shift, but even then, at least in the United States, like there was no obviously like, you know, big apologies or retracting of any of the reporting or nonsense that was put out there. But it did, you know, it started to change the narrative, and you could start to feel, especially as Bolsonaro was very clear as to who he was going to be as president before he became president. But as it became extremely clear to even the most passive of observer that he was going to be a disaster, not just for like human life and dignity in Brazil, but even for some of the, you know, the right wing and pro-capitalist forces that wanted to use him as, you know, hopefully like a sledgehammer, that, you know, he wasn't going to be as perfect for that job because of his own like incompetence and insanity. You started to see a little bit of a shift in the way that Lava Jato was covered as well here.
Yeah, exactly. And Bolsonaro only got to power because of Lava Jato, right? And he only got to power on an alliance with like extremely neoliberal forces, right? He nominated, before he was even president, he said, oh, my finance minister is going to be this guy who was like this University of Chicago boy, guy, who was in like Chile during the Pinochet years, doing all the privatizations and stuff. But yeah, you were going to say something?
No, I mean, I just sort of wanted to bring it into, you know, what we've seen, you know, just in this past, past week, right, where you have seen a shift even within now the judiciary, right, where now they're ruling, you know, now that basically dismissing the case against Lula comes with some very, you know, strange logic. You know, for like if they were to be, obviously we want them to throw out the case, but if they were at least to be, you know, have fidelity to the arguments that they had been making before about why this, you know, Lava Jato is legal and valid and all these kind of things. You know, the legal arguments for why they threw it away make it seem like there are other forces at play, more than just like somebody waking up in the middle of the night and saying, okay, I have a very different legal philosophy on March 8th, 2021.
Yeah, no one woke up was like, wait a second, like they shouldn't be doing this, right? And because there's just been like, ever since the leaks first came out, there's first started to open some space, started to open up within the media system to like criticize Lava Jato, and then slowly like there was like building of public opinion turning against Lava Jato, and also within the political system, right? Because even though the media weight of and the narrative of Lava Jato was as proving all the bad that PT did. PT isn't even like the party with the most indicted by Lava Jato, right? The leader of the majority of the government in here in Brazil, of Bolsonaro's government, is like from a party who was like super in Lava Jato, and all the political system was feeling the heat of Lava Jato, right? They were like okay with it because it was worse for PT, but they were also waiting for an excuse to put an end to it. And also within the judiciary, there were like a lot of people who were very uncomfortable by the way Lava Jato was eroding very, very important guarantees that are within the Brazilian constitution. So, for example, one of them, the Brazilian constitution says very clearly, a person can only be sent to jail after all appeals have been exhausted, right? And forever, since the constitution was first promulgated, that meant that after, there are no possible recourse left, right? They changed this understanding basically just to get Lula arrested in time, because he was convicted by the second level. I don't know what the term is, but if you like thinking of, stacking justice on the top of the Supreme Court and down below like the lowest court, it was only on the second level, and there were like many appeals left. So technically he wasn't going to be supposed to be arrested. But then the Supreme Court was like, you know what, that thing in the Constitution actually means that you can be arrested on the second level. And then they arrested Lula, and now they reversed course, right? So we're back to meaning only after the last appeal has been exhausted. So you can see like a lot of like ad hoc, like maneuvering just to make sure like the environment was right to nail Lula down. But then, with the leak in the public opinion, the judiciary already a bit angry with Lava Jato, or at least sectors, and also the political system, who now is like, well, PT is out of power. Like, you guys done our dirty job. So, stop. We're done here, right? And then we see like all these forces starting to get bigger than Lava Jato. So what happens is it goes to the Supreme Court. With the leaked message that we published, it is very clear to see that Moro was not an impartial judge. And this is what the Lula's defense has been arguing. And then they sent a recourse to the Supreme Court saying, look, Moro clearly has like these like very personal hate for Lula. He shouldn't be judging Lula's case. And then the Supreme Court was set to decide whether or not Moro was acting in a partial way against Lula. So right before this vote was to be taken in the Supreme Court, and it was, the word in the grapevine was that they were gonna say that Moro was in the wrong, and he was partial and biased against Lula. Before that happened, Fachin, which is that other judge, who is one of the pro-Lava Jato judges in the Supreme Court, writes a decision saying, that thing, how like Curitiba is the center for all the Petrobras investigations. Turns out none of this has anything to do with Petrobras. So all of this is null. Lula should be judged by a court in Brasilia, not these guys. And like after 7 years of like all of this stuff happening, like only now he realizes. And the analysis that most people subscribe to is that this was a last-ditch effort to save Moro, because the idea was that, well, we're going to end this. Lula would not have any more reasons to make all these appeals against Moro. And there's an expression here in Brazil, I don't know if there's a similar expression in here, which is you lose your rings so you can keep your fingers. And it was that, right? It was like, okay, well, we're going to lose Lula, but at least we're going to have Moro's decision stand against everyone else and everything else. So this is the gambit that he took.
So this decision basically would make it harder for any kind of investigation into Moro's activities, more difficult to do in the future, or like basically stopping what was already ongoing.
Yeah, because basically the idea was like Moro, Lula was crying that the refs were biased against him. And then what he said was like, you forget about the refs. Like, it shouldn't be happening in this stadium. Like, the ref doesn't matter. Like, we're going to play in a different stadium. So all of this is, forget about it. But one of the other Supreme Court judges, the one who hates Lava Jato, was like, we're going to vote whether or not Moro is impartial, because he fucking hates Lava Jato with a passion. And he just want to like burn the whole thing down. And it was like, I'm not falling for this gambit. We're going to vote it. So this vote is on hold. They were started voting, but then one of the justices said, okay, I need some time. I need to read this more. So, they're going to continue the vote later.
Wow.
But this basically was the logic that most people understand what's happening, was that the pro Lava Jato guy, gave away his ring so that he could keep his fingers. You know what, Lula is out of the picture, fine, his conviction is null, but, the whole edifice of Lava Jato still stands. The other judge was like, screw that, we're going to talk about Moro, and we still don't know what's going to come out of that.
One effect I've noticed about this is it allowed media coverage to sort of still take time to say, well, maybe Lula might be convicted of something in the future, as if he's guilty of something. Can you talk about that? Like, is that sort of stain? Are they still going to try to maintain some kind of stain on him after this?
Yeah, because what they're saying is he didn't say Lula was innocent. He just said the stadium was wrong, but he was going to lose the match here, and he was going to lose it in that other stadium. So, if I'm going to like beat this metaphor up.
That's good.
But then the Lula's case is going to be picked up by a court in Brasilia, and the judge can or can't, use all the investigative work that has already been done. So he can get all the stuff from Lava Jato, all the witness testimonies, all the testimonies, or the proof, all the stuff, and say, well, it was in the wrong place, but we can still use all of this stuff. Or he can say, screw all of this stuff, we're going to start from, square one. Regardless, it's very, very hard to imagine that anything would happen before the next election. So it's very unlikely that whatever happens is going to have any effect before Lula is able to run for president again, probably against Bolsonaro. But this is still an ongoing fight, right? Because whoever it is that is going to be judging it is still going to have this case to look at, and is still going to have to investigate this. Although it's very likely that it's going to prescribe before anything can happen. But another expression we use a lot in Brazil, which is whenever anyone's trying to make any predictions, which is that in Brazil, even the past is uncertain. So the future is unknowable, right? So it's hard to tell, but what it seems like now is that Lula will probably be able to run normally because there won't be any enough time for anything to happen before the next election cycle kicks on.
And how are you sort of seeing the kind of political read now that this news has come out? Obviously, Lula came out with a pretty big speech, after the decision. Very much, people reporting on it as a campaign speech, talking about how he was saying in his own words that there is no government in Brazil, based on the way that Bolsonaro has been handling it. I mean, what is the kind of general public reaction? And also, have there been any clues about how Bolsonaro and his people and team are feeling, maybe privately or publicly about, the decision?
So first of all, just the day of Lula's speech, after 2 years of insane Bolsonaro shenanigans and just no pretense at all of governing, no pretense of empathy, no pretense of being a normal person, just Lula giving a normal speech where people are are wearing their masks and being normal, right? It was just such relief. It was kind of mesmerizing. Even people who hate Lula was damn, the guy's good, right? But then the the point is that it kind of re-scrambles the whole thing, because Bolsonaro was basically playing unopposed, right? Because PT, the largest opposition party, the largest congressional bloc, was kind of like taken over by the whole Lula fight, right? Because they weren't mounting like regular opposition, and even the hard work that was being done by left-wing Congress people was kind of like getting lost in the echo, because it's very hard to comment any news cycle when you have like an insane clown every day, like doing dumb shit, right? So the day of Lula's speech was finally the day when it kind of like the Bolsonaro spectacle went into the back burner and attention was focused on something else. And I think this is something that you guys in the US are going to be able to relate, because Trump used to do this a lot, right? Just suck out all of the oxygen, all of the energy, and no other like conversation could ever happen. Like when there's a guy this insane like around, right? So now the first immediate obvious effect was that like they don't have like the monopoly of the narrative anymore, right? Now they have to play catch up as well. But it really scrambles up the political map again. Like it's like Brazil 101, don't make predictions, don't try to guess what's going to happen in the future. But I'm very stubborn, so I'm going to try to do that a little bit. What has become clear is that there was a lot of like anti-PT euphoria, and a lot of people were ready to like say, oh, the party's dead, Lula's over, none of this is happening. And they were trying to cast PT aside from any opposition bloc. So the other parties were still operating within the anti-PT framework of like PT's toxic. So they were like mounting an opposition, but wasn't very effective. So now we have like the return of like Lula and PT as the de facto opposition. So the rest of the field is kind of like re-scrambling, right? There's like a small left-wing party to the left of PT called PSOL, the Socialism and Liberty Party. And it seems like PT and PSOL are agglutinating in a bloc.
That's great.
Which is an interesting development. There's this like guy that's like identified with the left, but he's like this like very intellectual called Ciro Gomes, who was third place in the last election between Lula and Bolsonaro, and he was trying to be the left-wing opposition, the progressive opposition. He was trying to channel that energy to occupy that lane. But now that Lula and PT are back in the game, he's kind of like having to reset a new course. So that's going to be interesting. It seems like he might be able to lead a center, like from a centrist bloc somewhat. So in my opinion, it before Lula was back, the calculation was going to be who is going to be the person who is going to go against Bolsonaro, right? And the whole energy of the opposition was around that. Now the read somewhat changed and became like, no, it seems that like actually Lula or PT are the ones that are for sure to be in because we do knockoff elections, like in France, for example, which is a wide open field. Everyone fights each other in the first round, and then the two people with the most votes go to a runoff, right? So now it seems, and obviously like this changes like the weather, tomorrow may be different, but now it seems that like it's going to be Lula and PT definitely in the second round, because they've been in every single second round so far in every election. And then Bolsonaro is going to have to fight his like center-right adversaries to get to the second round. But obviously, like it's very risky to make any predictions like this. But this seems like what the field looks like.
Yeah, you mentioned Lula's COVID response emphasis. Talk a little bit about Bolsonaro's coronavirus record. And you had a talk with Benjamin Fogel on The Intercept last fall, where perversely Bolsonaro was getting credit for some COVID relief measures, and it was, bolstering his popularity. Where is he at now? And, why is Lula emphasizing that?
Yeah, so this is actually a very good point, and thanks for watching, man. That thing with Ben. When the COVID first started, Bolsonaro was like in denial, and he just hasn't changed course ever since. He's just like, screw this. Like, he was like making fun of people who wear masks, like saying they're like pussies or whatever. It's like, everything you shouldn't do. Is like, he's like the pro-COVID guy. It feels like. But in the beginning, like when there was like calamity and when it first hit and everyone's like, okay, everyone stay home. Congress passed like emergency assistance, like basically a guaranteed income for like 3 months. They passed like against the government's wishes. They wrote the law, put it into Congress, fought for it. The government tried to do a counter proposal of like a much less money for less time. The opposition fought, got this relief bill passed, which is basically what made Brazil like survive as even remotely like viable polity, was that people were getting this cash. And what is remarkable is that even though like the tragedy of COVID happened and the economy really falling badly, poverty in Brazil actually lowered just by virtue of like giving cash to people. So just putting it out there, like it's very easy to solve poverty. People who keep telling you it's very complicated, they're lying to you. Like you can just give people money and it's going to make everyone's lives better. But anyways, this ironically is what guaranteed Bolsonaro's popularity, particularly in the places where Lula is the most popular person, which is like amongst very poor people, very people who were like recently brought into the citizenry almost. As people who were just like in the middle of nowhere. And then within the Workers' Party government, there was a huge effort of not just giving cash to people, but like making sure they were like enrolled in all the relevant databases. Like there's like universalizing of electricity, because in the year 2000 Brazil was like a country that had like considerable sections that were just like no electricity. So we had like a widening of the state assistance net, right? And these people who were just like first reached by the state during Lula's government are the like rabidly Lulista, pro-Lula voting bloc. These were the people where Bolsonaro was able to get a foothold, and because of this emergency assistance. And what we saw is that Bolsonaro seems to have won among this cohort of population, and seems to be very popular with them, or now less so, but during the height of this assistance being paid, he was well regarded among this segment. But the thing is, the only person who could fight him in that was Lula, because however popular Bolsonaro might be because of this emergency assistance, Lula is even more so, right? Lula's returning to this also poses a problem to Bolsonaro, electoral problem to Bolsonaro in that sense, because even Fernando Haddad, the guy that ran in Lula's place, he wasn't that identified with this group of people as Lula is, because Lula is, first of all, is a magnetic persona, and he was born in these regions, and he has like a life story that is very relatable for a lot of Brazilians, which is like being born in the poor Northeast, immigrating very young to the more prosperous South to like find a job, do whatever you can. And this is just a story that's just repeating generation after generation after generation. So Lula is very popular with these guys. He PT lost because this bloc didn't vote. I mean, PT lost for many reasons, and I don't want to like try to reduce the 2018 election to one factor, right? But it is likely that if Lula had been the candidate, his like personal popularity with a lot of people would have been enough. Anyways, the government's paying this assistance that Bolsonaro fought tooth and nail not to pay. And this is basically what guaranteed Bolsonaro stayed afloat. But now this has run out. So they're not paying it anymore. The opposition again tried to like approve a new one. But now the government, like Bolsonaro, knew that he had to do it, right? And they did a very disingenuous thing. And if like, maybe 5 minutes ago, I did this passionate defense of just handing people money and doing the basic income. This is the counter argument to it, which is the trap of the basic income, right? Which is that they approved this law that's saying, okay, fine, we're going to pay people more. But within the law, the same law that says, oh, we're going to pay people for 3 months was also dismantling a lot of the welfare state in the country. So like, okay, we're going to pay people for 3 months, but then like other like very important pillars of the welfare state was eroded like in the same coup, right? So this is the issue with just giving people money, because there's a lot of right-wing people with bad intentions are going to use that.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, that's one of the difficulties with basic income, especially living in the world that we live in. It tends to come with those kind of right-wing motivations as well. So just very, very briefly, because I think we will have to just have another conversation in a couple months and see how things are going. I know we're going to be watching closely this, to see what happens with the Supreme Court and Moro, to see if that judgment, continues, investigation continues. Is there anything else that we should be looking out for over the next couple of months as this new scenario develops?
Well, before any of that, I just want to circle back to something that you said, because I ended up not answering questions. I went a bunch of different places and never quite got there, which is that you could see, like, after Lula's speech, an immediate change in tone. Like, so Bolsonaro was doing like speeches like he would never wear a mask. He would like say, "Oh, vaccine is dumb." Like there's people think I'm being hyperbolic, but he was said like, "I'm not gonna like take this vaccine. Like people are gonna take this vaccine and then they're gonna like turn into an alligator and they're gonna try to blame me." So like he was like putting this stuff out there. But now, like immediately after Lula's speech on Flávio Bolsonaro, Bolsonaro's eldest son, another dipshit and another politician, he has like this like Telegram channel where he like talks directly to his supporters. Like half an hour after Lula finished his speech, they were like, "Oh, the vaccine is the way to go," and Bolsonaro was seen wearing a mask. But I think one understated aspect of Bolsonaro's government is how deeply involved the military is, right? It is like a military government, within a civilian framework, but it is like generals like running everything, like a bunch of military people everywhere. And most importantly, the health minister was a general, however many star general. He was like the toppest of the top kind of general, but he was like a general, whatever. All generals are dumb to me. So, and he was like doing it clearly like disastrous job. There was like an episode in which they sent, he's a general and he's not a doctor, but he was selected because his specialty was in logistics. But then it turns out they sent things to the wrong state, right? So there's like a public health emergency in the state of Amazonas, and they sent the stuff to Amapá. That's how good logistics is. But now, yesterday, Bolsonaro announced a new health minister, a doctor, a crazy doctor, hydroxychloroquine guy and, doesn't think lockdowns are important, but at least like he's a doctor now, I suppose. But what a lot of people are reading between the lines is that now the military is trying to detach itself from the COVID because, the Brazilian military was, after the military dictatorship entered, they were like sent back into their barracks, right? Like, screw you guys, no more military and politics. And, it went like that reasonably well for most of the time. There's always like crazy, like anti-communist screeds by like old generals who are retired and things like that. But, it was somewhat of an equilibrium that was working until Bolsonaro came in, and it's just like packed full of military people. But now it seems like the military are going to have to own the tragedy that's happening, right? And that's why most people think they replace the health minister, change, generals out, doctors in, so they're going to try to maintain. But I think the most important effect, hopefully, of this is going to be the shattering of this illusion that people had that, the military is actually very serious and they're actually very good. And it just turns out they're still like the same crazy, like Cold Warrior, anti-communist, like Facebook chain believing crazy cranks they are, right?
Yeah. One fact I learned in that Fogel interview that you mentioned was there's more military ministers now than there was during the military dictatorships, which is, I think, yeah.
Jesus.
I mean, and it's just like, like the head of, there was a place here in Rio where they keep wild animals that were rescued or whatever. That place was being run by some soldier, right? Like, it's just like military, like running everything. It's just, and that's very dangerous, I think.
Yeah.
No, especially in a country like Brazil with the history that it has. Victor, this has been really illuminating. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us this evening.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I was happy to talk to you, David and Matt, and always happy to be here whenever you guys want. Just shoot me a message and I'll be here.
Just a little self-applause from us in a good Stalinist tradition. Everybody clap,
We should have, that kind of, solemn applause every time, particularly Victor leaves us.
Like that. That was a really great conversation, and I really appreciated him making sure that we didn't skip over the military aspect, because that's incredibly important. And people should definitely check out his upcoming work and follow him on Twitter. He's definitely a great resource and a good friend to have. Very happy to bring him into the Left Reckoning community.
Absolutely. Before we want to talk about NFTs and Bitcoin, but I do want to update. Yaku Perez finally conceded his attempt to overthrow the election and tweeted out that he's still a bit salty. He says, like, we are the third way, but it doesn't look like he's going to, for instance, endorse Lasso. So Arauz looks like he's in a good position. So
well, that's good to hear.
News. Some more good news, I should say.
And great news. And I know we didn't set anything or prep this, but I just wanted to, just throw out there that it's been such a illuminating moment to see the West's reaction and the Biden administration's reaction and the OAS's reaction to what's been going on in Bolivia, where they are trying to hold people who overthrew a government, and not only people who overthrew a government, but also participated in horrendous murders and massacres and threats against people who were organizing in that country during the coup government. They're trying to hold them accountable. And it's amazing to see all this doublespeak from the OAS, Organization of American States, from the Biden administration.
Human rights organizations.
Human rights organizations around this question. Where were they when people were literally being murdered by fascist gangs in the streets? Where were they when people were being told if they don't stop protesting, then remember when they had those horrible biker gangs running around, threatening that, oh, we're going to shut off your water, right? Stuff like that. I mean, it's just incredible double standards.
The idea that they're going after Inez because she just some political grudge, and not that she revoked liability for security forces or people who want to go commit massacres.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's short-term memory, and it obviously serves a very particular purpose, which is trying to. It's actually, again, so we didn't prep a segment on this, so we're just sort of shooting off the cuff. But it's been really frustrating to read some of the think pieces that you're getting out here in the media about this, because they actually are trying to bring back the original lie that led to the coup. They're trying to bring it back. So for folks who aren't familiar. I'm sure most people listening are, but basically, in Bolivia, Evo Morales wins this election, and then the right-wing forces start yelling that, like, oh, the election was fraudulent. The election was fraudulent. And the Western media just sprints with these claims, even though there was no evidence of this, right? And they sprint with it to such an extent that it actually creates an opportunity for the right wing to have a coup against Evo Morales. And they always love to say, like, well, actually, it wasn't a coup. Evo Morales stepped down, but it was literally the generals told him, you have to step down or there will be a problem. That doesn't sound like somebody stepping down. That sounds very much like a coup. And, now the New York Times and the Washington Post and all of these other publications, they've never apologized for their role in this, but they have run pieces that have said, oh, it actually looks like that was an overreaction. And there is no evidence of voter fraud in the election in Bolivia that elected Evo Morales. But it's been amazing to see similar publications like The Guardian and places like that rehash this history and act as if there wasn't a actually very clear determination that all those claims of voter fraud against Evo Morales were false, right? So they're trying to do like a both sides, like, oh, things have been crazy in Bolivia from administration to administration. It's like, no, it's actually very simple. Somebody won a democratic election. Then right-wing forces took over with support of the military and the United States and global capital and all of these so-called liberal publications, right? And then this right-wing government that came into power implemented nearly a year of terror against indigenous and left groups in that country, and then continued to refuse to have elections in the first place, and then had those elections and lost overwhelmingly. And now people are being held accountable for their role, again, not just in imaginary crimes, but in actual serious human consequences, crimes that led people to lose their lives. We're not talking about small things. We are talking about massacres of human beings, right? Mm-hmm. And if you can't see the difference between these two things, you are either willfully blind, right? Or frankly, an idiot. I'm sorry. They're trying to play everyone again. It's something, especially in that part of the world, that you have to deal with the military, the police force. And that's why Victor's point, for example, about what's going on with Bolsonaro and the military there is really important, right? Because these aren't neutral actors.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have anything to add to that.
So I've been seeing this all week, and I told folks we'd at least mention it. Like, that's my take. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that's my take on this.
No, I agree. It just puts me in the mind of certain type of like a liberal that might follow those mainstream sources also might be the type of person that is still holding out hope that Donald Trump might be arrested and actually pay.
Actually, such a good point.
Pay the price, and it's like, well, that's what it actually looks like. So I guess that's what when I responded to it, it was just like, thank goodness this woman. And you have to, and what the mainstream media won't want to do is catalog what exactly Inez did, which is like I mentioned about the liability for massacres, and also like that we said, like being a ready dealer with the IMF. Right, so just completely horrendous, and with absolutely no mandate. Also, like people in
Zero.
2016, and I thought the Hillary Clinton mandate for the winning the popular vote, right? Like they talk about like not having a fucking mandate. Inez, like Jesus.
Well, it's so funny, man. It must have been America, the America's Quarterly or something like that. There was like a piece, about like, how RKS like fails, right? Because he like did not do what he was elected to do, which was supposed to bring peace to the country. And they're saying like Inez they basically were arguing against it being a coup because they're like, oh, it's why would she be the one who implemented the coup since she was so weak? She was very much like an unknown and she didn't have the mandate. It's like, well, because she had an opportunity and she understood that she had the military backing and the international community backing to overthrow democratically elected official and become a president of a country that she never would have become president in the first place if it wasn't for the military and these forces, right? It's just funny. Like, it's so sickening to see the way that they tried to like,
Because
make these points. It's like, no shit, she saw an opportunity to like implement terror against her enemies.
The question is, why did so many other people think that she was preferable to the actual democratically elected government?
Yeah. It was because she was a right winger and a Christian who wanted to, purge the government of the satanic rituals of the indigenous people. And for folks who are listening, I put air quotes around that, right? That's like literally what they were saying. And when they brought in that comical bullshit, like 6-foot Bible into the halls of power in that country.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Total freaks. Yeah. So anyway,
talking about other freaks.
Yeah. Let's talk. How do you want to enter this NFTs? Okay. So, NFTs came out of nowhere for me. I think a month ago, I hadn't heard the term. I started seeing it a little bit. I saw somebody make a joke. I forget what his name is, but he posted the Elon taking a toke, and then said like that feeling when I find out the token is non-fungible. I thought that was very funny. And then I will admit I was a big basketball card fan growing up. So I hear Stefan and JF on the Go Off Kings talking about NBA Top Shot, and I got a little bit interested. I want to say I not interested enough to like actually invest any serious money into it, but and then actually when I found out how crypto it was, then I got turned off of it. But should we talk about NFTs first and some of the ridiculousness in terms of will these bring back the aura of authenticity?
I forgot about this.
Walter Benjamin said.
I mean, they're definitely going to be great for critical theory. I'm sure like people are already pumping those essays up right now. I don't know, man. Like, we want to talk about this just because I think it's very funny. I don't have too many big takes on it. The real take, like if you actually want to have one, which I really don't think you need to, this is just an example of what happens when you have some people who have access to just such wealth and they need to find ways to put their money somewhere that they know is just going to appreciate in value, and then find another sucker to sell it to later. And it's the same thing with Bitcoin and all of these other cryptocurrencies, right? It's just like, it's a great way to like just continue to pump up. Like all these people are like waiting for this moment when they're continuing to rise in value. Don't get me wrong, but like it's a whole scam of like just continue, trying to convince people like this is the greatest investment. This is never going to end until that time when nobody wants to buy the garbage anymore, right? That's what this whole system is about, is creating new markets for suckers. And this is a great one. And honestly, some people have pulled in some significant cash for themselves and a lot of hype. And I think it's very funny to watch.
Well, it's exactly. So just so people don't know, this is basically like, so Bitcoin, the whole cryptocurrency thing didn't really pan out because it's clearly not useful as an actual currency. You can use it to, buy things off of sort of illicit goods off of the dark web. But as actual currency, it's not very useful. It's clearly a speculative asset. So let's move on to being a little bit more honest about this being a speculative asset, like basketball cards, for instance, which is the famous one. But this isn't the only one. It can also point to different artwork, for instance, like digital artwork. And so it's basically using the security cryptography or whatever. I don't know the terminology here, but
blockchain.
A blockchain to point to a image file. Now, there's a problem with that. But before we get to that, I want to point out David Gerard, who I think wrote a book on Bitcoin, which I haven't read. Libra Shrugged: How Facebook Tried to Take Over Money. Yeah. I feel like I've had him on or listened to him. I can't tell if I've produced a show with him on or just listened to one with him on. But anyway, he posted this, and I'll just read it for you, David. Says NFT Explained. It's a blockchain version of this old app, and this is the app that says "I Am Rich." "I Am Rich" is an iOS application developed by Armand Hemrick, which was distributed in the App Store. When launched, the screen only contains a glowing red gem and an icon that, when pressed, displayed the following mantra in large text: "I am rich. I deserve it. I am good, healthy, and successful."
Yeah, man.
So there's that.
It's like a Silicon Valley sketch, man.
Yeah, and it was for sale on the App Store for $999.99. So that's cool. So this is a more interesting thread to me from the element of. So out of curiosity, this is at Jonty, at Jonty. And he says, out of curiosity, I dug into how NFTs actually reference the media you're buying, and my eyebrows are now orbiting the moon. Short version, the NFT token you bought either points to a URL on the internet or IPFS hash. In most circumstances, it references an IPFS gateway on the internet run by a startup you bought the NFT from. Oh, and that URL is not media. That URL is JSON file. So this is sort of like, I don't know if you remember early like MySpace, I feel like, or maybe for me it was like web forums where you needed a image hosting service, like Frog. There's like a Frog based one. I can't remember all these different services. It's hard to find free ones.
Yeah, for like your MySpace page, right?
Exactly. And so you needed to post your thing there and save the link.
Jesus Christ.
That's basically what's going on here with these, except just using the blockchain.
Except for millions of dollars.
So yeah, and what this guy points to is said, in short, right now NFTs are built on an absolute house of cards constructed by the people selling them. It is likely that every NFT sold so far will be broken within a decade, because he goes into it and these follow to, this is internet infrastructure. So I saw in one of I was just scrolling through the people talking about Walter Benjamin, which I admittedly need to refresh myself on, but someone's saying you can literally buy authenticity straight from the artist. You are not buying that. You are buying a little asset that points to that links to it's somewhere on a server somewhere that you can access, mediated through like your screens. This, and only you can do that theoretically. We've seen these things can be stolen and hacked. I don't know what hacking, how Benjamin accounts for things being able to be hacked and stolen like that, of what that means for the aura. But again, like this guy was saying, let's say I own the infrastructure that is hosting this artwork, right? You basically, if someone pays $50 million for a piece of artwork and it's ultimately pointing to your server, they basically need to keep you in business. You have a meal ticket forever on whatever dumbass ended up buying that thing.
And I have to add too that the reason everyone's talking about these now is because there's been some high profile sales, and the big one was I also don't think an accident, $69 million sale of
that's how you assess value.
Yeah, very like moron tech bro Elon Musk, just complete soup for brains stuff.
Raise taxes, my God.
But $69 million for a piece of digital art for the NFT of that, and guess what? The person who bought that is somebody who is behind another one of these NFT programs, another one of these blockchain programs. So it's literally, at least at that level, they are buying it from themselves to get other people to get excited about it and then to want to, go through them in the future.
Wow, what a surprise. I kind of also wanted to move on to this story that Vice did here, and I'll put it up for
yes,
you.
please.
I'll put it in the chat for you, Dave, if you haven't seen this yet. But I'll put it up for because it's interesting. It's somebody in Texas.
Also, wait, just before we go
Yeah.
too far, it's like, look, all these technologies are interesting, and they have like potentials that are different from this. What the reason this is funny and all is just such a sad indictment of our time. Was this just like rich people are trying to find ways not to launder their money, but to basically, to hide it and then to pump it and then to sell to some kind of sucker. And it is just a great example of the kind of dystopia that we live in, where people were doing that, not just with stuff like this, but with like Magic the Gathering cards or like Pokemon cards, right? All that kind of stuff is the same thing. It's like there's a bunch of people who have way too much money to know what to do with it. And it's about time that the rest of us take
Honestly,
it back from
like
them at this point.
we are 2 years away from them doing like crypto sports betting. Like this in other crypto Bitcoin blockchain related news, this story I think very well reported by Motherboard here. I don't know why it's giving me so much of that header, but I guess I'll share it with you anyway. Here's what's happening in that viral oil well Bitcoin mining video. So I also tweeted this video out. This one here, Bitcoin initiated, and I'll just play it. So fracking well going right to this basically trailer of and all those are GPUs. So you have all the cooling and my comment on this was that isn't it miraculous to see currency get democratized right in front of your eyes? Because I mean that's the ridiculous. So I think some people had the wrong reaction, which is like which is putting a couple things that are true together, which is that one, all these crypto, the blockchain related, maybe there's someone to improve it, but as far as I know, rely on extremely like sophisticated calculations that require a lot of computing power / energy. Okay, so you see these things tied to natural gas. It looks like they're pumping that gas straight into Bitcoin. Those oil wells are already there. And what that rig is doing isn't necessarily salutary, but just to explain what is actually happening which is that an externality that is destroying the planet is instead being profitized, right? So natural gas creates all these other heavier hydrocarbons that it can't really deal with. Because dealing with it would be expensive and it's dangerous. So it can't really deal with it because it needs the state to basically build pipelines all over hell. Or, you'd need to have some kind of storage facility. So it can't do anything. Often what it does is just vent it, which is just literally let that shit go straight out. And Texas A&M students recently found that they're lying about, in the Permian Basin, just straight up lying about how much is being vented. And then what people are maybe more familiar with because it's visible is the flaring, which is they literally they turn it into CO2 basically, which is slightly better for the environment, but still obviously that's one of the main.
And it stays in the atmosphere for an extremely long time and like amplifies the greenhouse effect. It's a huge scandal and a problem, which we should definitely do something on that in the future, not to derail you, but it's insane.
And so this part of this is important to why we have this myth that natural gas, the whole being cleaner than coal thing, which is
natural,
right? And it's well, all of that may be so in terms of a type of formula, but when you think about how much all these canisters that are supposed to store this stuff just leak just straight into the atmosphere, the pipelines themselves, the reason natural gas is gained traction is because of sort of the just-in-time issues that we've talked about with regard to energy that is more preferable from a market standpoint. And so, this story does a good job of basically explaining that. I just think it's very interesting that, look, let's say in this let's say you got some sort of word from like Karl Marx, who's been doing the numbers in heaven and side by side with God himself, so they know everything. And they're like, you know what, we just can't do without natural gas now. I would just say it'd be nice to like force the externality to be put to a slightly better use than a fucking speculation, like digital
Well, no, Matt.
digital
I mean, this is
speculative
just
asset.
another great example of how capitalism is great at allocating resources
God.
for the social good. No, I mean, this is like honestly one of the most perfect examples of just how wasteful the system is.
Like of all, yeah. I mean, anyways, and I've heard the even darker implications of this, which to point to a dystopian future where your currency is controlled by fucking fracking wildcatters that will give you some currency to play it. You know, I don't know, buy some highlights with. So, anyways, that's your. That's probably not gonna make a lot of the crypto bros happy. I'm glad, David, you did get in with that. You know, these technologies can be cool thing because
I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm like, yeah. But this is all the cryptocurrencies are a nightmare.
Right.
I mean, just so no one misunderstands me, the cryptocurrency is a nightmare not just because of the technology, which again, like technology is just technology. Private currency has been a dream of the right wing for a very long time. And why is that? One, because they don't want their money to be tracked or traced. Why? One, because they want to participate in illegal activities, which again, let's think about. This is like good, like theories of democracy. What is like an illegal activity? Something that the public has said that they don't want to happen, right? In the ideal sense of that system, obviously, there's a lot of things that are illegal in our country that we would like to be legal, but they want to basically be able to have their money be held in something that is outside of public control. And that's not something that is very liberatory for us. And I think that, just because we're against the present state of things doesn't mean that we want to go to a period of time of like mass privatization of things that are, for some extent, like in the public domain, right? Which is like that the government controls the monetary system, right? Which gives us the potential, not the current reality, but the potential to control that system in the future, which is why people on the right and wealthy people are trying as hard as they can to find ways to avoid that. They do that through precious metals, and they want to create a new option to do that with crypto.
Yeah, it's studying for your bank account, basically. All right, folks. Well, we are going to jump to the post game, I think, now.
Yeah.
Probably be 10:15, 9:15, David's time. I keep forgetting he's no longer on the East Coast. Because really the difference, your background is the exact same.
That's true.
There's no extra lag or anything like that. It's basically than you were like a few blocks away. But yeah, folks, it's good talking with you. And
folks, if you're interested, support us at patreon.com/leftreckoning. That's how you get access to the post game. That's how you get access to all the bonus content. And for people who are patrons, if you want to ask us questions during the post game, hop on the Discord at Mod, and we will respond to all those questions. Looking forward to hearing from everybody.
Okay, folks, see you in a half hour.